Beneath the Ceba's shadow, the Maya taught stone to keep time. Their cities fell silent, yet calendars, cenotes, and star serpent stairways still whisper. Tonight, follow the footprints they left in light and water. Tonight, we journey into the story of the Mayans. You step into a low green world where the air smells of wet limestone and leaf mold, where ceiba trunks lift pale crowns above a sea of palm and vine. Beneath that canopy, you listen to the hush before rain and the distant bark of a howler, and you follow narrow paths that weave between milpa clearings, the color of drying maize. Heat gathers beneath woven roofs, smoke of copal climbs in thin ribbons, and water drifts away into hidden channels in the stone while cicadas spin their soft music in the leaves. The first frogs speak from shadowed pools, and a faint sweetness rises from cut squash vines and hanging gourds. In this damp light, the earth feels old and attentive, and you slow your breath as if you are entering a room kept for memory. You might struggle to endure what they once lived through. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You move among the first villages, where hearths glow along houses of pole and thatch, where bark cloth dries on cords beside braided strings of beans, and where gourds shine like small suns in the shade. Maize stands in well-kept rows, and broad leaves of squash roof the ground between, keeping the soil cool and damp. You hear a steady mortar tapping as kernels give way under a worn stone. By careful choosing the cobs lengthen season by season, and you taste dough sweetened by ash and lime as a tortilla warms on a comal while light brightens the eastern edge of the trees. The milpa breathes in cycles you can feel in your chest. Burn and sow, weed and harvest, rest and return. At the settlement's center, a low mound rises, faced with packed earth and rough stone, a place where footsteps slow and voices soften. 3 clay figurines stand at the edge of the courtyard, their noses and brows rounded by many hands. A shell trumpet rests beside a basket of cacao pods that smell faintly of fruit and clay. Incense burns. A child sleeps beneath a cotton wrap braided with red thread. A dog curls in the shade near a painted gourd of water lifted at daybreak from a clear sinkhole. The mound gathers attention the way a hearth gathers a family. People pass close, drop cornmeal or flowers, and walk on more quietly than before. You reach a ceiba that opens like a hand against the sky, its buttress roots flaring from the ground like the ribs of a turned boat. The trunk shows the gloss of resin and the memory of fiber bands tied for blessing, and a woven ribbon hangs where the bark makes a gentle hollow. Elders speak of its branches as bright roads for birds and souls, and of its roots as cool paths toward the place beneath the world. Houses seem to turn toward that living pillar, doorways aligned to catch the same morning light, thresholds set to greet the calm face of the tree. A storyteller begins, voice steady and low. With each phrase, you follow a cord that binds people to rain, soil, and seed. 3 stones set for the hearth become the first corners of the world. A cooking fire warms the new day, while a crocodile's back rises and its ridges become hills. He draws a line in ash and counts days as if he were counting beads, a deliberate tally that watches sunrise and moonrise and notes the noon when a shadow stands shortest and surest. Time settles around you like a woven mat. The breath you take seems to enter the count, and the count seems to enter you. The first plastered platform becomes an event everyone remembers. Men carry baskets of lime and sand. Women smooth edges with shells. Children bring water from the sinkhole in gourd after gourd and laugh when a lizard scurries across the drying surface. When the clouds part, the platform gleams like a pale sheet laid upon the green world, and at its base a mottled mask dries in shade, features broad and serene. Drums answer one another from opposite corners, and a figure in a cotton mantle lays down a woven cloth with red bands to mark a path. The beat is slow, then slower, until it matches the rise and fall of breathing. Beneath the new surface, jars sleep in lined pits. Each is sealed with a plate and a plug of clay. Within lies a handful of grain, a bead of jade, or a tiny figurine shy with pigment. The earth receives these gifts with a scent like fresh rain on stone, and when the pit is closed, palms smooth the crust until no seam remains. People speak more softly as they pass. The platform thickens with meaning, weight resting upon silence until both feel like one substance. At evening, the plaster takes the last light and glows with a quiet skin of pearl. The season turns uncertain. Rain begins late and returns in shallow bursts. You taste the faint bitterness of roasted seeds shared to stretch rations. At dusk, voices drift toward the Seba, long lines of sound that ripple along the village margin and sink into leaf and water. At night, the platform holds firelight and shows every footprint as a small, dark pool. In the sinkhole, droplets count the hours with patient echoes, and frogs answer from reeds that stir when a breeze moves the heavy leaves. The maze still stands, though shorter than last year, and women lay hands upon the stalks as they pass, a gesture of greeting and hope. A day arrives when a group returns from the forest, bearing a stone larger than any carried before. Rollers of palm slide under it. Levers press. The slab settles beside the platform and takes a polish as hands and sand work across its face. A line appears, then another, then the calm curve of a mouth and the clear edge of an eye. The carving turns into a mask that faces the courtyard, human and more than human, watching without blinking. A change moves through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Voices lower, steps place themselves with greater care. The stone looks toward the platform as if both belong to one sentence spoken slowly. You keep walking until the paths meet other paths that run white with crushed limestone. They lead toward larger clearings where platforms multiply and long raised roads slip away under the trees. You taste a faint grit of lime on your lips and feel the ground grow level and deliberate beneath your feet. The air carries more voices now, and a new steadiness threads through the bustle as if the count of days has learned to speak through people. Villages trade salt, honey, worked shell, and green stone shaped into small mirrors that flash when they catch the sun. Canoes slip along narrow channels, ropes creak, fires bank down to coals. Along one of the white roads, a small shrine rises and shines like bone in the green. A painted gourd is set upon it, and inside lies a folded strip of bark marked with neat signs. A keeper lights resin and chants the day's count, and you understand that the tally is becoming a language carried from place to place. In that clarity, a new kind of power takes its seat. The voice that names the day can also name the duty, and the duty gathers hands to build, to harvest, to prepare for rites when the evening star returns to a familiar place at dusk. Through it all, a quiet uncertainty walks beside you and never quite shows its face. You can follow the crops, the platforms, the first masks, and the turn of seasons that grow generous or grudging. You can taste the salt on the skin of those who haul baskets and hear songs rise at the hour when swallows skim low over the plaza. Yet the moment when ceremony becomes rank and rank becomes recognized, rite will not hold still. It hides within the drumbeat, within the soft shine of plaster after rain, within a patient movement of weight from one pair of hands to many. Night arrives at last, and the storm that hovered all afternoon drops its veil. The Seba releases a damp scent like wet fiber. Leaves shine. The white surface of the platform turns pearly under clouded sky. You sit at the courtyard's edge and listen to the even beat of rain on thatch, to a dog sighing in sleep, to the sleepy rhythm of a hand shaping a tortilla in warm light. The first traces of ceremony hold firm against darkness. The village settles into a waiting that feels both humble and immense, as if the earth itself were gathering breath for whatever will rise next from the green silence. You follow a pale road that glows like moonlight fallen to earth. Crushed limestone presses under your sandals and lifts a soft taste of shell and old reef to your tongue. The path runs straight through palms and gum trees, and each step carries you toward the first cities that rise from the green like lifted plates of light. People speak of this whitening path at dawn. White road, bright road, the road that remembers feet. It binds village to village and stretches toward two places whose names begin to carry weight in the forest air, Nakbe and El Mirador. At the edge of Nakbe, you pause before a platform that seems to breathe. Its surface gleams with fresh plaster made from lime burned in mound kilns, the scent of hot stone still lingering in the morning. Women smooth the shine with wet cloth until the surface holds the sun as a calm sheen. Men tip baskets of rubble into a deep heart of fill and level the ground until it takes a new horizon. Children bring gourds of water from a nearby sinkhole and laugh when dragonflies hover above the rim. The platform brightens the way a hearth brightens a room, and voices lower when feet step upon it. Stucco faces begin to look from the terrace edges. A wide mouth curls into a serene smile. Eyes lift with a gaze both human and mountain. A soft scroll marks breath. The mask belongs to a living hill that shelters maze and cloud. Red pigment settles into carved lines and turns shallow grooves to warm shadows. At dusk, the face glows in torchlight while owls pass low over the plaza with wings that hardly stir the air. The mask watches the eastern sky where the morning star returns, and in that steady attention, you feel how a building can learn to listen. From this platform, a stair rises to a triad of temples set like three peaks on a common base. The pattern repeats across the growing city. A higher peak and two companions hold the sky between them like a cradle. Processions climb in slow coils, conch trumpets sounding a rounded note that hangs in the humid air. From the top, you see more white roads running outward, flat and steady across the forest, as if light had chosen to become a path. The triad form reads like a map of the upper world, a plan that lets people place themselves beneath ordered heights. You move along the causeway that stretches toward the Mirador lowlands. Under the trees, the road holds its straight line with a patience that ignores roots and hollows. In some places, it becomes a raised spine of stone. In other places, it settles into shallow cuts, then lifts again as if it follows an older memory than the forest itself. Travelers move with you. Porters balance baskets of salt and honey. A trader carries jade flakes wrapped in bark cloth. A woman holds cacao pods against her hip, their dry rattle like rain trapped inside a gourd. A young musician taps a hand drum to keep the pace even. El Mirador rises from the plain with a quiet that feels enormous. Courtyards open one after another, their floors hard and cool beneath a fine dust. On the far side, the La Danta complex climbs above the canopy until green turns to sky. Courses of stone stack upon ramps and terraces until the top leans into light. Fresh plaster gives the faces a soft glow even in shade. From a high platform, the horizon circles in a woolly ring, and a thin wind arrives with the smell of wet leaves. Here you meet a fact that holds like stone. La Danta stands among the largest pyramidal works of the ancient world by sheer mass, and its height lifts thought the way a ceiba lifts birds. At the base of the complex, a painted frieze shows beings moving between water and hill. Limbs flow like streams, jaws open with the ease of creatures that belong to both worlds. A water place lies just beyond, dug and sealed to hold the rain that runs from the plazas. Clay and lime close its skin, and during dry months it becomes the city's memory of storms. People line up with jars and gourds. A keeper glides a paddle through the surface to clear leaves. A heron steps through reeds and places each foot with careful grace. The basin mirrors clouds that pass slowly as if they too are counting days. The count of days speaks through priests who walk with folded bark paper against the chest. Dark lines of soot and bright points of red mark faces and shoulders, a quiet map of number and meaning. Wet plaster receives signs. Small bones receive them too. Names of lords and names of days find steady places in room corners and stair shadows. The sun reaches the center of the sky and begins its fall, and a shadow moves along the stair in a way that tells everyone the chosen moment for incense and chant has arrived. The calendar reveals itself not as a list, but as a breath that the whole city takes together. Across the open court, another triad stands, and beyond it, another. The form multiplies without losing calm. Each base carries three heights that frame a strip of sky. Drums answer through the courts. In the ball court, a thump of rubber meets stone, the sound like a heartbeat slowed for rest. Players move with hips and shoulders and keep their hands still. The court opens to the plaza, so the game and the right watch one another. A runner passes at the edge with a string of cacao beans that ring against a shell. The smell of copal, fresh lime, and warm maize dough thickens the air. Lime firing continues through the afternoon. You approach a ring of kilns built from rough blocks. Workers feed wood into openings until the inside shines with a white-orange glow. The forest gives its fuel, and the stone gives its powder, and the two become the plaster that holds a city together. Smoke lifts in the heavy air and leaves a taste on your tongue. Coals mutter. A boy draws a circle in ash and wipes it away with his ankle, a small motion that feels like a private prayer for balance. The kilns cool and spill pale chunks that crumble to powder under wooden pestles. Night brings ceremony to the Ladanta stair. Torches line the steps and flicker in a low wind. A priest carries stingray spines and folded paper that will drink the offering. The air smells of resin and iron. Musicians pace between drums and shell trumpets and keep a low pulse that does not falter. High above the plaza, a figure lifts a bowl and tips the content toward the sky. The people answer with a sound that rises once and then falls into a hush. The city holds its breath to greet the breath of the gods, and the torches pull small suns across the stone. Morning returns with the grit of plaster underfoot and the green smell of wet leaves. Porters file along the white road again. Women gather at hearths to grind maize and fold tamales for workers. A child sets a water jar on the cool floor of a shaded room. A scribe polishes a shell inlay until the tiny mirror holds a square of sky. A mason taps a new block and listens for the pitch that promises the stone will hold. Every sound enters the slow choir of labor that gives the city its clear and measured heartbeat. You pass a quarry where ramps descend into pale rock. Baskets move in a steady chain. A master traces a line with charcoal along the face of the cut and nods to signal the lift. A team levers a block from its bed, and the stone leaves behind a smooth scar that gleams like the inside of a shell. Along the rim, women tend small gardens of herbs used in rites. The sharp scent of crushed leaves travels on the air and settles in your throat with a clean coolness. Bees hum at the lip of a woven hive. A green hummingbird hangs in front of a red flower, as if it were a bead on a string of light. You walk through the crowd and feel the scale of devotion in the way bodies align to tasks without clamor. There is an order here that keeps its name close. Villages send people in seasons when fields can rest. Leaders call in favors owed and gifts promised. Brotherhoods take turns at quarries, kilns, and ramps. Overseers keep tally with cords and knots, yet no single voice rises above the city like a whip. The motion of work seems to gather from the rhythm of the count, and the way offerings flow, and the way the white roads invite feet. The full secret of how hands were called and kept still keeps its quiet. By midday, you reach a terrace where a new stucco mask waits under a woven awning. The surface holds a humid shine. A woman carries a bowl of hematite red and breathes on it to wake the color. She touches the corner of the eye and draws a smooth line that meets the edge of the nose. A man presses a shell into the cheek and leaves a shallow curve. Smoke lifts. Bees murmur. Someone sets a jade bead in a small clay cup at the base of the wall so the blessing will remember where to settle. The scent of copal and lime gathers in the shade and the mask seems to exhale. Not far away, a keeper opens a painted room where bundles rest on a low bench. Within one lies a spine of the sea wrapped in cloth and a strip of bark marked with neat signs. A quiet hand lights resin and the first curls of smoke run along the ceiling and slip outside. The room smells of salt, lime, and a faint sweetness of cacao husk drying beside a hearth. The keeper closes the door with care and the soft thud settles on the plaster like a folded bird. A small bell shaped from clay gives a single note, and silence follows it like a shadow. As evening falls, you walk the bright road back toward Nakbe. Bats flit along the edges of the causeway, where the air holds the day's warmth. Far behind you, the highest terrace of Ladanta stays gold for a last moment, then dims to a pale glow. Frogs begin their patient counting in the low places, and the road answers with a sheen that looks almost liquid. The stucco faces hold the night with serene attention. The white roads hold the promise of return. You carry a quiet sense that devotion has learned to live in stone, and that the mystery of how so many hands were drawn into one breath will keep walking at your side. You leave the raised roads and step into a cool room where the walls glow with a soft lime sheen. A mat lies on the floor, and a low bench holds a row of shells that drink ink. A scribe sits cross-legged on a jaguar pelt. He wets a brush of fine fiber and touches the shell to wake the black. The brush lifts, and a line appears on folded bark paper, quick and sure, followed by a red that sets a pulse through the script. The room smells of soot and crushed hematite, and a faint sweetness from the bark. The paper itself feels alive, layered with lime and polished by smooth stones until it accepts the ink like skin accepts a gentle rain. You learn how the book is born. Strips of inner bark from fig trees soak in clear water and rest in a pool cut from the rock. The pieces are laid out in a grid like a weaving. Lime paste spreads across the surface, and a river stone smooths the paste until it gleams. The sheet folds in an accordion that gathers many days inside one object you can hold between two hands. A cover of deer hide waits in shadow. When the scribe closes the book, the ink thins to the scent of rain on hot stone, and the room grows very still. The book becomes a small room for memory that can open anywhere a priest lights resin and breathes a chant. The scribe paints a day sign and a number that moves with the ease of a dancer switching partners. A reed cup holds blue made from indigo that has learned to cling to a pale clay. It settles like sky on the page and refuses to fade. The brush writes a name that looks like a person speaking. You hear the breath in the curls and teeth in the small cuts. The sign for Lord wears a headdress of smoke and feather. The sign for maize leans like a stalk at harvest. Every word looks like a creature that can stretch a limb and turn its head. The book fills with voices, and they do not quarrel. They sit together and keep time. Outside in the plaza, a tall stone waits upright with a flat front, prepared to receive the same music. Men pull a cord tight to guide the lines. The carver taps a rhythm that enters the skin without breaking the hush. A thin ribbon of dust falls at each stroke. The stone becomes a tree that grows words. A lord stands nearby with a cloak of cotton and a belt that holds jade like green water. He raises a hand to greet the day named by the book and about to be named by the stone. When the carving is done, the surface holds a return to a first dawn far beyond living memory and a record of a present moment that joins that dawn. In another city, a stone names a day in the 3rd century and gives a ruler at Tikal a place inside the deep count. The sound of drums steps forward and then recedes like surf. You spend a morning with daykeepers who carry the sacred count in their bones. A circle of maize dough rests in a bowl. 4 kernels lie at the edges to mark the corners of the world. The keeper opens the book and glides a finger along the folding path. He names the day with a soft weight and draws a breath slowly through the nose. The sound reaches the courtyard, where a woman wears a newborn against her chest. She listens and nods. The name of the day fits around the child like a gentle garment. A thread begins that will pull through harvest and sickness and marriage and the choice of when to build a doorway to catch a certain light. The count of 260 gathers one world, and the count of 365 gathers another. 18 months of 20 days carry work and travel and market and field. Then a handful of extra days drift like dry leaves across thresholds, where voices lower and work softens. The 2 counts meet and touch hands, and then part again. They meet once more after many seasons, in a span that the fire remembers when it is tied with cords and rekindled for a new round of life. You feel the relief of breath released as the new flame climbs, and you see embers carried to distant hearths so that families in separate towns wake to the same warmth. An observer waits at a temple stair for evening star. He counts each day on a string of knots. When the brilliance returns to the western sky, a drum gives a single low note. The scribe writes a sign for that light and another for a day that will echo it. Pages bloom with tables that tell where that star will vanish and where it will rise. The room keeps a long quiet, as if the stone itself were listening to numbers. A boy watches from the doorway and holds his breath to keep still. When he exhales, it feels like a tiny wind that moves the edge of the page. In a corner, a second book lies open to a set of short lines. They belong to eclipses and their shadows. The scribe has placed a small shell on the mark where the next darkening may travel. He closes his eyes and runs a finger along the path and stops at a place that matters for a journey or a rite. The finger rests while the mind sees the sky surrender its bright for a little while. The book takes that surrender and keeps it carefully. Then it lets the sky return. At the edge of the plaza, a woman offers a tray with cacao and flowers to a small shrine. The day sign carved above the niche tells her that this is a good hour for speaking to the water beneath the world. She places the cup inside and touches her forehead to the stone. A breeze moves through the ceiba, and the leaves turn their pale undersides. A coolness steps across the plaza as if a spirit has gone for a walk. The sign glows very softly in the shade, and the woman feels known. The carving on the tall stone includes the name of a place and a knot that tells of lineage. It speaks of a king who sits upon a mat woven by many hands, and it speaks of a mother whose bloodline flows like a river. The glyphs turn the mat to a throne and the river to a road. The people gather to hear the words read aloud by a voice that keeps even time. You feel a hush that deepens with each pair of signs, black and red, number and name, day and deed. The stone answers with a weight that does not press. It steadies. It gives feet a place to stand. At night, the scribe sets down the brush and closes the book. He places it inside a bundle held together with a band of cotton and a small disc of jade. The bundle rests on a shelf that smells of cedar. You imagine another room in another city where a different hand is teaching a different script to stand and speak. You follow the trail of signs backward along the coast where older marks wait on stones that lie in river heat. The first spark of writing hides itself there and refuses a simple story. It allows a hint of kinship and then slips behind reeds and mangrove and the hiss of small waves, leaving you with the sense that the first teacher of the brush was generous and quiet and hard to name. Morning returns. The plaza brightens. Children play at writing on the dust with sticks. They look up when a priest chants the day, and they echo the sound as a game. A young apprentice polishes a tiny mirror until it frames a square of sky. He sets it beside the book so that light can visit the page. The mirror shows a bird passing, and the page shows a day sign with an open beak. The two images sit together as if they belong to one family. By midday, a new stela rises, roped and braced, and the crowd stands in shade that smells of copal and crushed grass. A lord touches the stone and then withdraws his hand. The carver clears the temporary supports, and the surface shows a fresh face for words. A drum calls a slow measure that matches the pulse at your wrist. The first sign is cut, then the next. The stone learns its own name. You know that it will stand when the mat has grown brittle, and when the cotton band has loosened, and when the page has traveled to another room. The stone will speak across dry seasons and wet seasons, and keep a clear voice when many other voices have gone to rest. Evening gathers. The scribe rolls his shoulder and smiles without hurry. He pours a little water into a shell and rinses the brush until the black cloud thins and disappears. He sets the brush to dry with bristles straight and true. The room dims to a blue that reminds you of the pigment that will not fade. The book sleeps. The stone glows with the last light. You feel the count continue without your help. It moves like a wheel that turns because many hands push at different moments and because the road under it is even. And because the desire to place a day inside a larger day keeps waking in human minds. Morning light pools in the plaza at Tikal and shows the calm faces of old stones. Smoke rises from breakfast hearths and folds itself into the still air. You stand near a stela that names a king who has kept the city's breath in even measure. Drums speak from the temple shadow with a sound that matches a steady heart. Into this quiet, a new pulse arrives from the white road. Banners lift above dust, feathers flare, the glint of obsidian finds every eye. A procession enters with backracks that carry war signs cut from wood and shell, atlatls carved with birds, and darts bound with green points that look like wet leaves in sun. The count names the day with a firm voice, and the city listens. Messengers kneel and place bundles beside the stair. They open cloth and show shields rimmed with mirrors, helmets rimmed with feathers, and discs stamped with a design that looks like a round eye with curling rain lines. The smell of resin and oil mixes with the scent of hot limestone. The visitors carry a way of dress that feels new. They wear nose bars like narrow moons. They wear sandals with thick soles made for long roads. Their hair rises in stiff fans bound at the base with green stone. They move with the calm of people carrying a message that cannot be hurried. A name walks at the head of the column and takes its place in whispers around the plaza. The sound of it feels like a spark. Siaj Kak. A fire is born. He climbs the first stair and pauses so that everyone can breathe in time. A herald raises a fan of bright quetzal feathers, and the air lifts in a small wind. Below, warriors set their dart throwers on the stone and lay down banners so that the cloth does not touch dust. Up on the terrace, sacred bundles rest against the wall, wrapped in cotton and tied with cords, each holding a bone or a stick or a mask that must be approached with careful words. You watch the face of Tikal's lord as he receives the party. The exchange moves with a formal beauty. Gifts step from hand to hand. Words step from mouth to ear. Incense climbs. A conch sounds and holds a tone like a line drawn across water. At evening, the courtyard glows with torchlight, and the new wind meets the old wind in the high stair where shadow and flame share a single edge. Night settles. The city sleeps, but the breath of sleep feels higher and lighter than before, like a traveler who has climbed a new terrace and is learning how to rest there. Days pass with a rhythm that keeps its center. Yet the air of the city begins to carry a sharper edge. On the ball court, a player wears a new kind of guard that hugs the hip and the rib. In the armory, a craftsman drills holes through bright discs to lash them on a shield rim. In the scribe's room, a page shows a figure in a square hat that rises like a small step pyramid, and the figure holds a throwing stick with feather flares where a hook meets the shaft. In workshops near the market, green obsidian shines with a glassy light that is not of local stone. The flakes ring with a high note that feels like cold water on rock. News moves along the white roads like smoke. In the same year, a king's name at Tikal meets a stone that speaks of the end of his breath. The plaza hears the story and grows very quiet. People bring flowers and maize dough and lay them near a stela that holds his earlier victories. A woman hums a song that uses only 5 notes and returns to the first with a small sigh. The city rests in that song. Then work begins to dress new rooms and polish new stair edges, as if the stone itself wants to present a fresh face. Offerings increase at dawn. Torches burn longer after dark. The courtyard seems to learn a new step that is neither fast nor slow. Siajkak moves through the courts with a guard of men who carry round shields and short swords edged with obsidian. They speak in low voices that ride on a sound like the letter S. Their words mix with Maya words like water that has met another stream and learned a new color. He greets elders with respectful hands. He leaves bundles in shrines as if giving thanks for safe arrival. On a day chosen from the book, a youth with a calm brow and bright eyes takes his seat on the woven mat. The name that follows him through the rooms is Yaks Nun Ahian, first crocodile. He wears a collar of green stones that lie cool against the skin. He holds a spear that flashes once in the sun and then rests. The plaza receives this seating with ceremony that rolls like a slow wave from stair to stair. Drums give a deep tone. Conch shells answer with a long breath. Women cast flower petals that dust the steps with red and yellow. Priests lift plates of burning resin until blue smoke fills the space between roofs and sky. Old banners share posts with new banners. Old gods receive words that honor their long watch. New symbols reach into the same smoke and touch the same sky. The city agrees to hold both without quarrel. In workshops near the quarry, carvers trace a different border on the faces of altars. A slope and a panel appear, stacked in a way that feels like a stair learned by stone. The angle catches light that runs along it like water on a channel's lip. On a painted wall, a warrior struts with a headdress that lifts like storm cloud. Round eyes stare from a mask that rides above the brow. The image turns heads because it looks both near and far. It feels at home, and yet it brings the scent of dry valleys that lie to the west of the great forests. The court begins to dress itself in these mixed signs, and the mixed signs begin to feel like one body. Merchants find busy days. Salt and shells move toward the high places. Cotton and cacao move toward the coasts. In the market, a trader shows mirrors cut from obsidian that are dark as deep water. A child laughs when his face floats inside and then hides behind a mother's skirt at the strangeness. Jade cutters learn new measures for ear spools that sit wider and thicker along the jaw. Shield makers add bosses that throw back light like a small sun. The ballgame learns a change in posture. The hip still rules, but the stance grows more forward, more set to strike a dart if needed at the edge of the court. You walk above the city on the ridge and watch smoke climb in straight threads from many roofs. The scent is resin and roasting maize and the faint acid breath of lime. Banners move in a wind that comes from the west at afternoon. A single hawk hangs above the plaza and hardly moves a feather. The line that separates trader from envoy from soldier does not draw itself cleanly on the ground. What began as gifts might already carry the weight of law. What began as counsel might already carry the hint of command. The city absorbs this blur and lives with it as a person lives with a change in weather that lingers for a season. In a quiet chamber, a bundle lies on a mat. The cloth is old and the cords are new. A priest sets a small cup of cacao beside it. He speaks a prayer to the fire that was born on the road and to the fire that has burned in this city since the first plaster shone. He cuts a cord the width of a reed. He ties a new one the width of a finger. The bundle does not move. Yet the room grows warmer by a breath and the cotton smells sweeter. The city feels this adjustment wherever a lamp is lit. At night, a ceremony climbs a tall stair. Torches braid flame and smoke, and light reaches masks and glyphs so that the faces seem to breathe. A new banner is lifted beside an old banner. The cloths touch. They hold still. A lord raises a bowl and tips a red line onto paper that drinks what it is given. A conch gives one long note. The people answer with a murmur that opens and then shuts like a calm wave on a stone shore. Above the roofs, the stars look down without blinking. A bright one near the west sinks. Another rises. Tables in closed rooms can follow this dance for many years to come. Day returns with longer lines at the workshops. A scribe inks a name tied to the youth who took the mat. Another page writes the year as a bead on a long cord that reaches back through many stones to the first dawn named by the city. On a wall near the ball court, a painter shows a figure in a square hat standing on a place sign that means Tikal. The figure stands with 1 foot forward and holds a dart thrower like a baton of music. The lines are clean and the colors are sure. The image rests without tension. It shows a world that has learned to place a new thing beside an old thing and let both stand. You leave the plaza by a stair that smells of sun and lime. The white road meets you at the foot and runs out under the trees with its old confidence. A breeze slides along it and brings the dry scent of distant uplands. The city breathes in time with the road. The breath feels different than it did before. It is still steady. It is still deep. It carries a new tone that may be gift or warning or both. The answer does not hurry toward you. It walks with the banners and the mirrors and the green points and keeps its own measured pace. You stand where the forest opens to 2 distant horizons. On one side, a line of temples lifts like a jaw with bright teeth. On the other side, another line answers with the long curve of a serpent. 2 emblems share the air. The Mutul sign of Tikal holds the strength of an old seat. The Khan sign of Calakmul coils with a quiet that carries range. Between them, the white roads grow tense, and the wind that crosses the canopy feels watched. A procession moves across Tikal's great plaza with the patient roll of drums. Banners thrum. The scent of copal gathers and lingers along stair edges. On a high platform, a new stela rises to name victories and gifts. The carvers cut the date with care so that the world hears the rhythm of days as a steady truth. Messengers return from allies with baskets of salt and cotton and the sheen of jade. The city's breath keeps even time. Yet at the rim of sight, a different pulse begins to show, faint as lightning inside a cloud. South and east, Karakol hums with its own projects. In a shaded court, scribes press lines that glint like wet vines on stone. There is talk of a bond to the serpent court far to the north. Cords tighten between cities you have walked and cities you have only heard named at fireside. A lord at Karakol drinks from a painted vessel, while a page shows the calendar that rides beside Venus through the seasons. The vessel touches the lip at an hour chosen for hard work. The city answers the choice with spears that rest in new polish. The year that follows enters the stone with a chill. In the count that Tikal keeps as a steady river, a sharp bend appears. The drums lower their tone. Voices thicken with smoke. A blow lands and the city bows its head. It is the year that memory will carry as a bruise. The year when Karakol, standing beside Calakmul, humbles Tikal. The plaza learns silence that has weight. The stelae do not fall, yet the air around them grows heavy. The fire at many hearths burns late into night, as if families are feeding the flame with patience. Work does not stop. It begins again with a long in breath. Gardens receive more careful hands. Workshops keep their rhythm. Yet a hush settles along the white roads that run toward rival courts. The word for defeat does not travel alone. It travels with words for learning, and for gaze, and for the naming of friends who may not always be friends. You walk the ridge and hear a song that holds one note longer than before. The city absorbs the note and refuses to break. The plaster keeps its shine. The count keeps its number. To the west, a new branch springs from the house of Tikal. A young lord sets out and takes his seat in a valley wrapped by rivers and ridges. The place will be called Dos Pilas, and it will carry the old emblem on its first stones. You watch its plaza fill with workers who shape blocks and burn lime with the same careful skill you have seen elsewhere. The stelae rise to praise a lineage that knows its own roots. The nights glow with offerings to forebears whose names feel strong in the mouth. Seasons turn and the valley listens to other voices. Envoys reach the court with gifts that taste of distant uplands. A serpent standard unfurls in a calm wind. The young lord learns to speak to both directions. In one year, he leans toward the house that birthed him. In another, he leans toward the court that offers a larger shield. The plaza nods at both gestures because each brings safety for a time. The paint on the glyphs grows thicker. The drums deepen. The stairways carry more footsteps. A prince becomes a bridge, and the bridge learns to sway. Back at Tikal, the old strength gathers itself. Ceremonies grow deliberate. Pages fill with clean columns of sign and number. The name that belongs to a new heart for the city begins to appear on shell mirrors and lintel beams. Jasao Chankawil steps from the page into the plaza and places the mat beneath him with a calm hand. He walks the rooms of the temples that face the sunrise and the sunset and listens to each stare. He speaks to the daykeepers who watch Venus and eclipse. He learns the city's breath until his own breath matches it. Kalakmul answers with its own fullness. The long reach that it has grown through years of craft now tightens into a certainty that can be felt in markets and on roads. Lords in distant cities wear headdresses that nod toward the serpent throne. Tribute journeys through forests where tapirs leave wet tracks in the night. Along the Caribbean shore, canoes rest with cargo that has already promised itself to one court rather than the other. The Serpent Palace records the web with a clean hand, and the web holds. In the quiet of a small shrine, a keeper lights resin and waits for a sign to turn. A tiny flame leans. The keeper breathes out and names a day when movement should begin. Runners carry cords tied in patterns that tell where to stand and when to lift the mirror and when to lower the spear. The plan holds the steadiness of a table, written for the path of star and planet. The word for attack shares space with the word for omen. The two sit side by side as if they are cousins at the same bench. The night that matters arrives. Torches drift across the plaza like slow fish. Drums stay near the ground. The ball court holds its breath, and the hoops turn to dark circles in a sky that has fallen to earth. Far off, a flash touches the horizon where you know the other city waits. The movement that begins feels older than either court. It rides along the old roads, into old forests, and between old shrines. It lifts obsidian points as if they are returning to a set place in the story. The air tastes of resin and iron and sweet maize dough left beside sleeping bundles. Morning brings the sound of people gathering for news. The messengers arrive in thin dust. They kneel. They raise their hands. The plaza hears a victory declared at last for Tikal, a victory that will be carved on wood and stone and carried in song. The year will stand as a pillar in the city's memory. The name of Jasao Chankawil joins that pillar and leans against it with ease. A new temple rises to mark the breath that has returned to its full measure. Inside, a lintel will show a lord that stands firm in sunlight that has finally broken through cloud. The serpent court does not vanish. It withdraws like a great creature sliding into shade. Its cities still ring with the sound of markets. Its shrines still receive offerings that smell of flowers and smoke and rainwater. The roads still lead to it, though fewer feet walk them this season. Alliances do not die. They sleep. They dream. They wake in smaller rooms where lords talk with low voices and lift cups that show careful paintings of past kings. The world does not become simple. It becomes layered. You walk the plazas of both courts in your mind and feel how the rivalry has taught them to speak in clearer tones. Stele stands straighter. Calendars learn to announce their work with firmer lines. The ballgame glows with a charge that is both sport and omen. The people keep their gardens neat. The children memorize day signs with pride. The servants bring cacao with steady hands that do not shake. Peace returns, though it carries the memory of noise inside it. A small uncertainty remains, gentle and persistent. You can see which banners stand where. You can read which names rise in which year. You can trace the line of battles, seats, and long embassies. Yet the first spark that taught one city to favor one ally over another refuses a single face. It hides in a hushed conversation between brothers. It curls in a script painted small inside a bundle. It passes as a nod at a stair where only two figures stand. It keeps its secret, and in keeping it, it keeps the world human. You step off the bright road and into a valley that murmurs with water. Palenque breathes through springs and runnels that slide beneath courts and terraces, and the sound of moving water threads every hallway like a soft song. The roofs rise with clean lines. The walls shine with careful stucco that still holds the warmth of many hands. The city calls itself La Cama, great waters, and you can feel how the flow cools stone and thought and keeps the air soft even in noon light. You move along galleries where light arrives in thin squares. Reliefs watch you with calm eyes. A lord stands with a child whose face carries an old name, and above them branches open into a living cross with a bird that spreads bright feathers. The image ties household to cosmos without strain. You sense a lesson in the ease with which the scene holds power and tenderness at once. The palace opens with courts where columns frame slivers of blue sky. The scent is lime, damp earth, and resin cooled on stone. A stair descends into the temple of the inscriptions. The air grows cooler and tastes of chalk and quiet. A thin trickle sounds along a hidden channel. You follow a torch and watch its small flame steady itself in this deep room. The stair turns and turns until the chamber opens, and the great sarcophagus lies at rest, a pale boat carved from stone. On its lid, a figure leans at the crossing of world tree and sky band. Roots and branches meet. A feathered creature perches above. A jaw of earth opens below like a dark flower. You kneel and let the light pass across the carving, and the scene breathes with measured grace. The Lord within lies with a face covered by jade that still glows like water at dawn. A web of jade beads covers chest and shoulders so that the breath of the life he lived seems to linger as a soft pressure in the room. Shell and pearl lie near hands that rest with a calm that teaches the body how to be still. This is Kinich Janab Pakal, who left his breath in the year the count names after many steady decades on the mat. Above him, 3 long stone panels write a history that moves from deep beginnings to the days of his reign. The script does not rush. It places each date like a stepping stone set in wet clay, and the clay holds. You climb back into daylight and stand where the cross group rises. 3 temples speak to one another across a small plaza, each with panels that pull myth into the same room as lineage. A triad of sacred beings looks out with the quiet of old teachers. A king presents offerings so that the story of the first ordering of the world can lean over his own household without breaking. The breeze in this court smells of wet leaves and a little smoke. You touch the cool edge of a panel and feel the slight grit from lime that long ago dried in sun. Along another stair, a row of stucco figures waits in niches with eyes half closed. Their bodies are lean and long, their hands open. They stand as if they have waited for you since the plaster was new. The city speaks of time with a voice that never rises. It tells you that memory depends on care. Doors are kept in good repair. Channels are cleaned. Names are spoken at the right dawns. The water and the script keep one another alive. A soft uncertainty lingers in the carved lid you saw below. The figure may be falling into the mouth of earth to seed a rebirth, or rising along the trunk toward a bright bird that carries him to a new seat in the sky. The tree might be maize in its sacred aspect. The band of sky might be a living serpent that holds the stars. The image invites both readings without forcing a choice. It prefers poise to verdict. You feel peace in that poise. You travel southeast, where mountains lean together and a river writes bright curves through a green floor. The air of Copan carries the scent of river stones warmed by sun. Macaws cross the plaza with loud voices and bright wings. The stelae here stand like tall people with faces that still hold fine lines. Their robes are carved with knots, beads, and feathers so precise that even time steps gently around them. The bodies turn a little to the side, the hands cradle offerings, and the eyes look past you into a place you can almost imagine. A stair climbs a temple face with blocks carved on their fronts until the risers become a long page. The hieroglyphic stairway tells a history in thousands of signs that rise under your feet. The count of kings moves with your steps. The names lean to greet one another. Victories and rituals stack like steady breathing. You climb and the story climbs with you. And for a moment, script and stair feel like one invention that lets a city walk up through its own memory. At the base of another temple, a square altar rests like a low table set for a meeting of elders. On each side, a lord sits cross-legged upon his mat. 16 faces ring the stone in calm succession. Hands extend to pass a scepter that looks like a living creature turned to light and held without harm. The founder sits with a name that carries Quetzal and Macaw. The last in the line sits with a brow of care and eyes that look to both past and future. The year the altar takes its place belongs to the late 8th century, when the city wishes to state its story in a single breath that all can hear. You let your palm rest on the edge of the altar. The stone is warm. The macaws cry from the trees. A boy chases a ball across the plaza, and the rubber thumps in a way that is gentle compared with the thunder of drums. In the market shade, a woman grinds cacao. The smell thickens the air with a music of its own. A carver thins a flake of obsidian to a knife that catches a sky square in its face like a small mirror. The city proves that memory is not only words. It is the taste of seed, the sound of birds, the clean line of a chisel on a good day. In a quiet room, the bones of the founder lie with ornaments that speak of travel and of a road taken from far away to this valley. The eyes of his portrait sometimes wear round goggles and a nose bar that looks like a narrow moon. The look hints at upland styles from lands where the air is dry and the walls rise in clean angles. The body tells a second story through the trace of the water it once drank. It suggests that childhood began in another place, and that rank and mission brought him here to begin a house that would last through many seasons. The city accepts both stories and keeps them close. Between Palenque and Copan, you feel the thread that binds story to blood. One city sets a king to rest beneath a lid that turns the underworld and the sky into neighbors at a single table. The other places its kings on the four sides of a single stone so that each looks upon the others with courtesy. Myth and genealogy share rooms without friction. The living walk between rooms and breathe a calm air that teaches the heart to beat without hurry. Evening comes to the Copan Plaza with long shadows that lie like blue cloth on the paving stones. A priest lights resin and a round scent blooms. A scribe steps near the stair and reads a handful of signs aloud for a small circle of listeners. The voice is level and unforced. The macaws settle. Crickets begin their steady music. You close your eyes and hear water somewhere under the layers of stone, the same silver whisper you heard in Palenque. The cities are far apart, yet the sound of care makes them feel near. One question continues to sit at the edge of these courts without raising its voice. The images that blend ancestors with gods do not explain where one ends and the other begins. A king can wear the face of a youthful maize spirit. An ancestor can sit on a branch that belongs to the first tree. A founder can borrow the gaze of a warrior from a distant plateau. The art leaves room for the breath of all these identities to share the same chest. In that open room, the story feels complete even as it refuses a single answer. Night deepens. Torches draw warm circles on carved faces. The water hushes the court. You feel the work of memory continue without strain. Names are kept. Stories are tended. Offerings are laid with steady hands. Genealogy does not chain the living. It gives them a rhythm. Myth does not float away from fact. It sits beside it and shares a bowl of cacao. You breathe in and out and hear both cities breathe with you. The past does not sleep. It rests, it holds, it nourishes the next dawn. Twilight gathers on the ball court, where walls hold a long echo. The stone is cool and smooth beneath your hand. The sloped sides glow with the last fire of the day, and the sky above turns to a slow blue that deepens by the breath. A rubber ball thumps against the floor with a sound that feels like a heart finding its steady pace. Players enter in cotton gear that hugs the ribs and the hips. Belts are stiff with leather and wood. Armbands hold bright feathers that stir with each step. Torches wait at the corners with bowls of resin that will wake as the first star lights the rim of the court. The game opens and the sound changes. Hips and shoulders meet the weight of the ball. Knees lift and turn. The thump rises to a rhythm that keeps the body from rushing. The rings high on the walls watch with stone calm. When the ball kisses the wall, it answers with a low note. When it bounces clear, there is a quick intake of breath from the crowd. Sand shifts. Chalk dust hangs in a thin veil. Each strike calls to an old story, the way a conch calls to water. Two brothers play in a place below the world where the air smells of damp stone and wild flowers. Lords of night set trials that glitter with unfair light. A head rolls and becomes a ball that keeps moving. The sun learns its path from that motion and promises to return. You stand near a niche where incense curls in thin blue lines. A keeper lays stingray spines beside folded paper and a dish of bright red that looks like fruit but is not fruit. A rope studded with thorns rests coiled like a sleeping snake. The keeper rubs a small gourd of water across his hands so that the skin will not tremble. He will offer the first pain to wake a door between rooms that share the same air. Near him, a tray holds cacao and white flowers for the gentle part of the night. Nothing in the court feels hurried. Everything waits for the count to name the exact breath when a blade can touch skin without anger. The ball rises like a planet and strikes a hip with a sound that goes through bone. A player turns and moves with a grace that comes from years of practice on mornings when mist lifts from the grass. His belt catches the ball and sends it in a low arc. It grazes the ring and falls away. A murmur runs along the benches. In the crowd, women wear cotton cloth woven with small red patterns that seem to move like fire when they breathe. Men hold shields at their knees. Children watch with wide eyes that shine as if the torches have fallen into them. The court keeps all those eyes in a single calm. Along the walls, carved panels speak without sound. On one, a team stands in full gear with knots of cloth around the hips and helmets that shine in the mind with a hard sheen. In front of them, a figure kneels and the neck flowers into serpents that stream forward with vines and flowers. The body does not look ruined. It looks like a seed in the instant of opening. Another panel shows a player who reaches toward a ring while his partner turns to greet a lord seated on a mat. The images do not point with a single finger. They show honor on one stone and a captive on another. They prefer mystery to command. A boy brings the ball in both hands to the center and the players bow their heads for a breath. A drum gives a single low note. The boy leaves the court and the play runs again. Dust lifts and falls. Sweat smells like clean salt. The ball becomes a small black moon that pulls everything in the court. When it loses speed, a hand brushes it into motion with care so that the rule is respected and the game remains in the realm of grace. A hush deepens when the ball climbs near the ring. The hush breaks into a soft sound like rain when it falls short. The sound pleases the night. At the edge of the plaza, a shrine receives the rope and the spines. A noble woman sits on a woven mat that shines with blue thread. She takes the thorned cord and draws it through the tongue with a calm that brings tears to her eyes and to yours. Paper waits to drink what the body offers. A bowl warms beside her, and the smoke grows sweet and thick. A serpent rises in the mind like a great green thought and unrolls a gift from its mouth. A warrior steps from the vision wearing a costume of stars and holds a shield for the one who will sit on the mat. This happens in the early 8th century by a river that bends like a wrist. The city remembers the night in lintels of stone that hold both names and a picture of the burning cord. The ballgame continues as if answering the rite. In a high place, a singer holds a low note that never wavers. The sound leans on the bodies of the players and steadies their breath. The ball climbs again, and this time it enters a ring and does not touch the stone. A bright shout rises and falls and becomes a whisper. Torches flare as if they had been waiting for that moment to take on more fire. The keeper in the shrine lifts the bowl and carries the smoke toward the court. It moves over the floor in a silver line and climbs the wall in a soft curl. The smoke marks a path the ball has already taken. It writes in air what stone has carved in relief. In another part of the city, a platform faces a deep water place where the surface looks like a black mirror. Offerings rest on mats. Jade beads click together like small, cool insects. Shells breathe a faint salt smell. A cloak of cotton waits to receive a body if the hour requires that weight and that silence. The people watch the water the way you would watch a face that belongs to a loved elder. The breeze sinks and rises. The leaves show their pale undersides. Sometimes a body returns to light hours later, as if the water wished to balance accounts. Sometimes nothing returns. The water keeps its counsel. You hear stories near the court that drift toward many shores. On some nights, the honored player offers breath because his body has climbed nearest to the path of the sun. On other nights, a captive gives the breath that was taken in battle. Both stories hold a beauty that is stern and quiet. Both stories walk the same road of renewal, where the count waits to lift a new cord of days. The truth may be a garment sewn from both cloths. The garment fits differently in different courts and in different years. The torches do not correct the stories. They only light faces that listen. The game ends, and the players bow to one another with hands open and eyes steady. The crowd opens like a flower around them, and then closes again as families leave in quiet lines. A keeper collects the chalk and the shells. He wipes a sign from the floor with the palm of his hand so that the court will wake clean in the morning. The smell of resin thins to a faint sweetness. Stars gather above the rooflines in patient groups that count their own time. Before you leave, you step to the center of the court and place your feet on stone that feels warm from bodies and breath. The night around you holds all the layers at once. The thump of the ball. The song that never wavered, the red paper that drank from a brave mouth, the carved wall where a neck opened into snakes and flowers, the dark mouth of water that keeps a garden for gifts, the old twins who play wherever a game draws a clear line in the dust. The stories do not collide. They circle like planets and keep each other in gentle hold. A small uncertainty remains, and it does not offend the heart. The court belongs to sport and to omen. It belongs to joy and to duty. It belongs to captives and to nobles and to gods who borrow human feet. No single law binds all knights. The rule that matters most is older than a city. Life feeds life, and the count moves forward, and the next dawn waits without impatience. You walk out beneath trees that let the moon through in thin coins of light. Cicadas sing with a slow saw sound. A dog barks once and then curls into itself and sleeps. The court fades behind you, but its rhythm keeps time in your steps. You feel calm, and inside that calm, a strength that does not rush. Renewal has its price and its mercy. The city knows both and breathes easily again. You wake to the soft hiss of rain moving through palm and vine. Drops tick like beads on leaf tips and gather into threads that fall from the eaves in clear chords. The earth drinks with a small sound that the heart understands. Smoke drifts from breakfast fires. A woman grinds soaked maize on a stone, and the paste grows smooth beneath her hands. She lifts a pinch and wets it with a lime water that brightens the scent and makes the dough shine. The change will feed bones and minds in a way plain grain cannot. The komal warms, and a round of dough settles with a sigh. The room fills with a smell that feels like a promise kept. Beyond the houses, the milpa opens under a sky the color of watered jade. Rows of maize lift leaves that clap softly in the breeze. Bean vines run their fingers up the stalks. Squash sleeps at the feet of both and keeps the soil cool. A boy moves along the edge and sings the planting chant he learned from an elder who learned it from another elder. The tune runs like a narrow stream through the day. At midday, a girl breaks open a squash and threads the seeds on a cord so that next season will hear this day answer. A gourd rattle sounds near the boundary stones. A keeper counts steps from the seba to the first row and nods at the measure. You step into heat, and the milpa breathes around you. Butterflies lift from the tassels. Bees visit small flowers along the field margin and leave with yellow dust on their legs. In a low place, a chultan opens like a mouth shaped by careful hands. Steps lead down to coolness. The plaster that lines the walls holds the smell of rain long after the sky clears. A jar rests on the landing with a rim worn smooth by many fingers. The keeper lowers a bowl and draws up water that tastes of limestone and shade. Farther off, a second chultan sleeps under a mat of leaves. It stores seed and dried chile in the cool season. Another village cuts similar chambers and uses them mostly for water. Another builds them as quiet pantries. The land chooses as much as the people do, and the purpose changes with the stone and the need. On the ridge terraces hold thin soil in quiet trays. Stones are stacked without haste and angled so that rains will not steal the work. A woman tucks beans into the corner of one terrace and pats the earth as if calming a child. When dry months lean hard upon the hills, the terraces keep their green longer than the slopes beyond. In the lowlands, the story turns to watercourses and flats that shine. Canals pass among raised beds that smell of wet clay. Men cut weeds and lay them in mats. The mats soften and become new earth, and the new earth lifts maize above the flood. Here and there, an egret walks as if it owns the field and watches for small life startled by the hose. You follow a ditch to a reservoir where the surface keeps the sky for a little while. Ramps of stone lead down to the water. A layer of sand and crushed zeolite lies beneath a lip of masonry like a secret woven into the dam. Workers learned that a bed of fine grains can clean a city's drink and keep sickness at a distance. The catchment smells of wet limestone and young reeds. Women come in the cool hours and leave with jars balanced in calm lines upon their heads. At evening, men bring bundles of firewood and stop for a sip that tastes of pebble and winter rain. In the forest shade, a keeper tends stingless bees in hollow logs sealed with mud and wax. The hives hum with a pitch that makes plants seem to lean toward the sound. He opens one carefully and lifts a pot of clear gold that smells of flowers near water. A thin thread of honey drops on a tortilla made from the morning's dough. The taste swells and softens, and the keeper smiles without words. He ties a woven strip around the log so the hive can sleep again. In the market, a woman sells honey in small gourds beside salt, cacao, and bright threads. Sweetness joins the diet the way bright beads join a collar. Planting and harvest move with the count of days. A day that belongs to sprout rises and the first holes are opened with a pointed stick that fits the hand like an old friend. A day for first fruits arrives and children carry small baskets to the shrine so that the house will hear itself answer the field. A day for resting the ground returns after seasons of work, and the milpa sleeps under flowers and birds while another plot wakes beyond the trees. The cycle dresses the year without argument. The people follow its fittings with trust that has grown through generations that watched the same sky and breathed the same scents after rain. You walk along a ridge where wind lifts the smell of smoke and pepper leaves. A woman spreads ash on a small bed that will receive seedlings. The ash will sweeten the soil and keep the plants from tiring too soon. She lifts her face to gauge a bank of cloud and listens for the low roll that carries far across stone. Cicadas begin their thin cry in chorus. Their voices often mark the turn toward wet months. Old men name the sound in phrases that place it beside the first thunder and the first taste of new maize at the fire. The body learns to hear these signs long before the mind has words for them. A canal leads you into a wetland where beds rise in long panels and water runs between them with light on its back. Children place stones along the edges where the current nibbles. A man checks a sluice and slides a board into place. The water slows. Fish flash in a narrow green. Birds visit in the last hour before dusk and leave the fields picked clean of small pests. The beds push a second harvest from the same season, as if the earth rewarded careful hands with a second gift. In the great cities, water listens to architects. A plaza slopes by the breadth of a grain so that rain runs like silk to a cistern. Gutters speak to corners. Corners speak to drains. The drains speak to a basin where reeds clean what the city has touched. Night rains fill the pools and morning birds step the rim and watch their own thin reflections. You feel how the field, the roof, and the street learn to share a language in which flow is the verb that holds every line. Not every season tastes sweet. A year comes when rain grows shy and the milpa wears a dull green. Women grind longer at dusk to calm the mind. Men lead children to dig new pits for water and line them with plaster that dries to a chalky skin. A group moves to a fallow plot earlier than planned to give the old ground room to breathe. Traders bring squash and beans from wetter valleys and leave with woven cloth and salt so that hunger does not sit alone in any house. The villages keep each other upright with these exchanges. The count bends without breaking and waits for a storm to smell its way back from the sea. At the end of the harvest, a family builds a small altar of maize stalks and rests ears upon it like sleeping children. A mask of corn husk hangs beside a jade bead that once sat at a throat. The young maize lord smiles with the bright calm of a first sunrise. A mother touches the altar and feels her grandmother's hand inside her own. The house breathes in a single rhythm that cannot be owned by any one person. It belongs to all who plant and all who grind and all who share the last tortillas of the day. A question remains at the edge of the field and refuses to trouble your rest. How exactly the people balanced soil and rain and labor across centuries sits like a shy animal in tall grass. Some chambers under the ground kept water. Some kept seed and meal. Some communities raised beds across shining flats for many seasons. Others used terraces and moved the milpa with the patience of a shepherd. The pattern changes with the land and with the years, and the wisdom rides inside gestures that are easy to miss if you watch with only the eyes. Night returns and the fields grow dark. Fireflies stitch slow lines above the rows. The Chultan holds coolness and the reservoir holds stars. A single ear of maize leans against the door, a sign that tomorrow will include soup for a neighbor. The air tastes of ash and lime, and a sweetness like the end of a good song. You breathe with the land, and it breathes with you. The cycle tightens its cord around the house and the village and the city until all of them belong to one calm loop that welcomes sleep. You enter a court that waits for dawn with the stillness of a held breath. The floor is hard and cool beneath your feet. A low pyramid faces 3 small temples across the plaza, and the line between them feels taut like a cord stretched at first light. A keeper sets a bowl of clear water on the western stair so the surface can hold the sky. You stand by the bowl and watch the eastern rim brighten. The sun lifts, and from your place, the disk rises first behind the middle shrine, then months later behind the northern one, then after another season behind the southern one. The city of Uaxactun set this site long ago so that the year could open itself like a fan, and the fan keeps opening for any patient eye. You walk on while the light strengthens and enter a vaulted passage that smells of lime and damp stone. The ceiling climbs by slow inches as one layer of block steps inward. Then another, until the 2 sides meet in a narrow seam that catches a ribbon of sky. The corbel tames mass into an upward hush. Your voice lowers without choice. A torch throws small gold upon the joints and shows the labor of hands that learned how to let weight float. You press your palm to the wall and feel a faint cool that moves into your skin like a drink. At the far end, the passage opens to a doorway that frames the sun in a bright bar at the hour chosen for dedication. A scribe waits in shade with a folded book and a string of knots. He has counted the days since evening star slipped into the glare and the days until it will return to the western sky. When a point of cold fire appears at dusk, a drum gives one low word and the book accepts the date. You feel how this planet becomes a companion that speaks through tables of number, through stair shadows, through the tilt of a lintel above a door where breath cools as people pass. The same city that counts the light also writes it into stone so that the count and the wall can nod to one another like neighbors. You climb to a high terrace where winds comb the trees. Below, a square court opens, and beyond it, a pyramid rises with a stair that drops to the north. Each balustrade carries a line of triangles cut into stone like a row of teeth. In the late afternoon of the day, when night and day match hands, the sun slants so that the stair grows a chain of dark and bright. A serpent seems to move as the light walks down each step, and the head of the creature waits at the foot where a carved mask faces the plaza. You feel a crowd hold its breath, and you hear the small wave of release when tail and head meet and the great body rests. A painter kneels beside the stair and touches red to a carved scale. The red belongs to the east, the west belongs to black, white belongs to north, yellow to south, and green to the center that holds the Siba and the sky path in its trunk. Builders carry these colors in the mind while they set walls and measure shadows. The city becomes a textile of directions, each hue a thread that runs through rooms and across courts and into fields where the milpa listens to the same ordered speech. The ball court you crossed earlier answers a whisper that lives in the stones. A clap in the center comes back as a neat chain of echoes that step away into the far end and return. The sound stands up straight in the air. It seems to carry feathers. People smile without words. The court is a place for play and for omen, yet it is also an ear that teaches the body how to hear straight lines. A child learns that sound can be offered to a form, and the form will send the sound home full of measure. In a city near the sea, a round tower lifts from a square base and opens small eyes to several slices of sky. You climb its inner stair and place your hand on the cool outer wall where the breeze tastes of salt. The windows catch particular risings and settings. They narrow attention until a star sits inside a slit like a bright seed in a husk. When the light appears where it should, the keeper smiles and moves a shell from one bowl to another. The action is small. The reassurance large. The tower does not try to own the sky. It invites the sky to visit for a breath at the right hour. Midday arrives in the hot months when a cord hung from a lintel points to the floor without shadow. You stand in the square and look down. Your feet give no sign on the stone. The light falls as a clear column and turns the world to a room without corners. Children laugh and chase this strangeness across the plaza. Daykeepers mark the moment with calm voices. The zenith passage tells planters when to trust rain, when to open the earth, when to soil the hands with a work that will feed the next winter. A city takes its cues from a sun that stands directly above the crown of the ceiba and blesses the green road between roots and sky. You pause at a stela placed so that sunrise grazes its edge on an anniversary carved long ago. The light finds the line and runs down the stone like a slow knife. The date belongs to a king who built a new room for a household god and cut the ribbon of the doorway at the proper dawn. You feel the weight of the act in the floor under your sandals. A household starts its days with a door that greets the first light in the season chosen by book and by sky. In the workshop, a mason kneels with a cord, a sighting rod, and a bowl of water. He sets the bowl so that the surface quiets. He places a reed at the far lip and aligns his eye through reed, cord, and a notch on a stake. He shifts a hair to adjust the line until the reflection and the rim and the notch sit in one straight thought. He taps the stake and steps back. The measure looks simple, while it holds a power that will outlast his bones. A young assistant watches and learns without speaking. The method moves from bodies to stones and back to bodies in one gentle flow. You return to the vaulted passage at dusk and stand where the seam meets the sky. Bats cross the blue with soft wings. The stone cools and releases the day's heat into your palms. You think of the hands that lifted each block and pushed it inward until the gap narrowed to the width of a finger. The room does not press. It steadies. It tells you that weight can be convinced to behave if asked with patience and if balanced with equal care on both sides. A fact stands firm beneath the poetry that walks these courts. The builders placed great works with a precision that answers the year, the path of evening star, the swing of solstice, the equal days at the hinge between seasons, the brief noon without shadow. The works call these events to mind even when clouds cover the sky. The city holds the calendar in its body so that time becomes a set of rooms you can visit without carrying a book. A small uncertainty rests inside the joints. You can read the alignments and taste the success. You can see chords and stakes in murals and imagine water bowls and plumb lines and careful eyes. Yet the last fraction that lets a serpent appear on stone at an exact hour in a season that wanders by a handful of days keeps its quiet. The secret might live in more patient watching than you can hold, or in chants that slow the heart to match the world, or in the shared breath of many workers who learn together how to let light obey. The secret seems content to stay in shade, and the shade is kind. Night lifts over the roofs. Stars take their chairs. A dog sighs in a gallery and sleeps. You step into the plaza and feel the grid of courts around you like a soft net that holds without binding. The stones do not hurry you. They invite you to stand still for a moment and let the sky make its slow announcements. When it speaks, you will hear it in the color of a wall, in the length of a stair shadow, in the way a doorway keeps the dawn like a memory. You breathe once and the city breathes with you, and the alignments that have watched many generations watch you as if you are already part of their order. You smell salt long before you see the water. Mangroves breathe in green curtains, and the tide slips among their knees with a sound like silk pulled through a ring. The wind carries tar, fish, and wet rope. A canoe noses from a channel and into open water, where the color turns from bottle glass to deep blue. Paddles rise and fall with a rhythm taught by fathers to sons, and by a few mothers who have learned the sea with the same calm confidence. The hull is hollowed from a great tree and rubbed with resin until it shines. The prow lifts a little and shows a painted eye so that the boat will keep its way. You step aboard and feel the body of the canoe answer your weight with a small sway that settles your breath. Trade begins here in a language of tide and shore. Bundles of salt ride in woven sacks that leave a dust like frost on everything they touch. Jars of honey rest in fiber cradles. Strings of cacao beans chime softly when they shift. Stingray spines lie wrapped in cloth. Shell trumpets sleep with their mouths closed. Cotton bolts are rolled tight and tied with blue thread. A boy carries a gourd of water and a smile that tastes of pride. The steersman glances at a line of Ks and keeps a bearing that has guided more journeys than the count in a single book can hold. The boat finds the rhythm of the long coast and begins to skim. You pass a place where low platforms face the sea and smoke from salt kitchens once lifted straight into still air. The scent of brine and ash lingers in the wood and in your memory. Far to the south, in wetlands lined with red mangrove, posts sleep underwater, where kitchens for boiling brine once stood. Their workers fed fires under clay vessels until crystals grew like winter flowers and filled baskets that traveled inland by canoe. The trade tasted of life. For salt kept fish and meat through the hot months, and salted tongues kept stories going around night fires. The sea paid for patience with this white harvest, and the villages that tended it became steady partners with the cities under the Seba. A squall passes, and the world gleams. Canoes move like silhouettes along a green edge. The crew speaks of ports where the coast opens its hands. On a low island near the northern capes, a harbor keeps good holding ground behind a coral lip. Their merchants of Chichén Itzá once counted shells and beans in shade and checked obsidian cores that flashed with a clean dark. A little shrine faced the water with a single door so that every boat could salute a god who liked the smell of salt. From this island, boats veined outward to fetch cotton, honey, salt, fish, copper bells, and to carry jade and painted pottery toward cities that sit inland like quiet suns. The canoe turns into a river mouth that smells of fresh mud and bright leaves. Current presses the hull with a strong palm and then relents around a bend. Upstream, a market sprawls beneath trees where parrots argue and laugh. Traders in short capes and narrow headbands stack baskets and watch the shadows on the ground to keep measure of time. On one mat, cacao beans lie in neat ranks, like thin brown teeth. A woman counts with steady fingers, filling a small bag that can pay for a fine cloak or a laborer's season, depending on the city and the year. Beside her, a man pours a dark drink from a tall vessel into a shallow cup and whips it so that foam rises like a small cloud. The foam is the pride of the house. He dusts it with ground flour and a breath of Chile. And the scent climbs and settles in your chest like a kind thought. You follow the beans into other rooms. In marriage negotiations, small bundles pass from family to family with the same care as jade. In offerings to ancestors, a few beans rest on a cloth that smells of resin. In the scribe's chamber, a pot painted with glyphs that name the drink stands ready on a low bench. On the court where the ball thumps like a heart, a winner receives a cup that steams in the cool hour before dawn. Cacao carries warmth and value and story. It travels far from the groves that love the shade of taller trees along river banks and mountain slopes, and it connects wet forests to dry coasts in a chain you can taste. The sea opens again, and the canoe points east where the horizon looks like a straight line drawn by a calm hand. You pass a headland that shows a watchtower of pale stone and a line of low rooms with palm roofs. Flags flick in the wind and signal depth to approaching boats. A priest climbs a stair and lights resin at a niche where a goddess of weaving and moon and healing has often heard the scratch of oars and the small splash of paddles. Pilgrims leave cotton belts and little shells. Women touch the doorway with the backs of their fingers so that childbirth will be held by mercy. The port keeps reverence and trade inside one clear breath, and no one finds the mix strange. In the mind, you travel farther, up the coast and around the corners of the peninsula, down into lagoons where water turns still and green. You remember a white road that runs from deep inland to the coast, a road that lets feet carry news to boats without losing a day. You remember islands of shell and coral that show the cleanest water and channels that need careful reading when the wind turns. You remember a name told by sea people who carry it like a family song, a place where barter runs with a quick, sure hand and where languages mix like rivers in flood. The map you carry grows wide and patient and never quite closes its circle. A low truth waits at the edge of the sea and asks to be spoken. In the early 16th century, a large canoe heavy with goods crossed paths with strangers near the Bay Islands. The canoe carried cotton mantles, cacao, copper bells, flint blades, and fine pottery. The strangers wrote about the size of the boat and the order in which the cargo was stacked and the calm authority of the pilot who knew the channels. The moment belonged to a turning world, yet it also shows how far these coasts had learned to tie themselves together by regular voyages long before that meeting. You spend an afternoon in a warehouse close to the tide line where the floor smells of tar and palm. A tally cord hangs from a peg and each knot remembers a bundle. The keeper tips a basket of obsidian cores onto a mat. Some shine with a gray light that speaks of highland rivers. Some glint with a green that reminds you of rain seen through leaves. Another basket holds jade pebbles that come from a valley east of great volcanoes. A third holds red shells from warm reefs. Each speaks of a direction and a partner and a promise. The chords gather all those promises into one quiet grammar. As the sun leans west, a cup of cacao returns to your hands. The foam lingers like light on the edge of water. A sea breeze dries sweat on your arms and brings the faint clang of a small bell. Paddlers lift a new canoe and set it down with grunts that sound satisfied rather than strained. Someone sings very softly. The tune holds only a few notes and repeats them the way waves repeat themselves. The air smells of salt and flowers and roasted chile. For a moment, the market, the shrine, the open water, and the inland court feel like one house with many doors. The last questions arrive without heat. How far these boats ranged with regular confidence remains a story that does not give up all its words. You can follow cargoes by their stone and by the paint that clings to clay. You can watch ports rise and fall with the fortunes of inland courts. You can taste a network in a cup and hear it in the jingle of beans. Yet the complete pattern of routes that crossed long bays and skirted stormy capes and stitched these coasts to distant mouths of rivers still keeps pieces of itself, like a fisherman who smiles and shows a few good shells while leaving the best ones in a pouch. Night finds the raft of mangroves again and the channels that thread among them. Fireflies bloom over black water. A fisherman's camp glows on a shell ridge and the smoke smells of fish and palm and a little honey. The canoe slides toward the beach, and the prow kisses sand. The crew lifts the bundles and sets them high against the tide's reach. You look back at the starlit track the boat has drawn, and it looks like a pale path you have walked many times on land. The sea keeps that path only for a moment, then smooths it with a tender hand, as if to say that trade should be remembered by mouths and hearts more than by marks. You return to a southern court where the morning once rang with drums and now holds a hush that feels like a folded cloak. Grass pushes between floor stones. A fallen frieze smiles from the ground with a chipped serenity that makes your chest ache. Vines climb the stair and lean their leaves across carved eyes. A bat sleeps in the mouth of a mask that used to breathe incense. The city still knows how to be a city, yet it speaks more softly with each passing season. A wall shows smoke stains that were not from kitchens. At the edge of the plaza, you see a line of fire pits that ate through roof beams on a single night. Pots lie cracked beside benches that once held bark, paper, and shell. A doorway is blocked with rubble piled in a hurry. Outside the gate, a palisade trench runs like a dark scar along the ridge, and the packed earth shows where spikes once bit sky. You can feel how families tried to tighten their circle while the air grew thin with worry. The rain misbehaves across several cycles. Showers arrive too late to wake the maize with vigor. Storms come in angry bundles that run off in a rush and leave fields gasping. Reservoirs shrink to bowls that show their lined skirts. Silt settles in the bottoms and grows a skin of crackle in dry months. A keeper scratches the lines with a reed and frowns without anger. On a hill, a cholton opens and shows shelves that once held seed and now hold a faint smell of dust. People walk farther for water and return with jars that feel heavier than last year. You enter a workshop where the rhythm used to sound like two stones in friendly talk. The bench sits quiet. A mirror of obsidian waits on a shelf, and no one checks the square of sky inside it. A scribe's room holds a brush turned brittle and a shell with black dried in a thin crescent. A half-carved date rests on a stela face. The cut is clean and then it stops. The hand that made it left the line as a promise never kept. You hear that silence as a note that wishes to return and cannot find the breath. Facts appear like small stones in a shallow stream. At Copan, a final long count stands in the year 822, and then the chisels go quiet. At Tikal, a last stela bears the year 869 and watches the plaza thin. In a hill city to the west, a date of 909 rises like a lantern at the far end of a path, and then no more lamps are lit. The numbers do not shout. They only mark a closing cadence that many towns across the southern lowlands begin to share. In houses near the fields, meals shrink and stretch. Women grind longer to make dough that can calm a family with fewer tortillas. Dry gourds that once held honey wait with their mouths open. Children learn new chores sooner and carry water in pairs so that no one stumbles. A husband and wife hide a small bundle of jade deep in the floor and lay a hearth over it, as if to keep honor safe beneath the first stones of the house. The 3 hearthstones still glow at dusk, and the thin blue of resin still lifts when the day sign calls for thanks. Along a white road, grass grows where feet once polished the surface to a bone shine. Messengers travel in shorter loops. Allies answer more slowly, or answer with words that taste like smoke. Small raids flicker along borders and leave charred fields and stolen baskets in their wake. Refugees carry words of bigger wars in valleys where you once heard only market noise. A prince passes with guards whose faces look young and set. He grips a baton that used to signal festivals and now signals the closing of gates before dusk. You follow a ridge to a town that looks down upon a river bend. The plaza is smaller than the ones you have known, yet its sweep feels deliberate. Families from older seats have come here with their mats, their household gods, and their memory of the count. They build quick platforms and paint them in thin layers that still catch a little light at dawn. The daykeeper stands beside a simple altar and chants the name of the day so that children will keep the sound in their bones. In this place, the calendar still breathes, though it uses a shorter breath. Soil tells a slow story in the fields that lie behind abandoned courtyards. Rows have shifted across slopes too often, and the earth grows tired. Terraces crumble where work gangs no longer mend stones after each hard rain. The milpa receives seed with the same dignity as always. Yet the cobs return smaller, and the kernels sit in less generous ranks. Men walk the edges and touch the leaves with the same old kindness. The leaves answer with a dull green that grieves the eye. You feel how patience stretches and thins like a rope that has been pulled many times across rough wood. In the market shade of a city that holds a little longer, cacao still foams, and a trader still rattles beans in a palm to judge weight. Yet the honey gourd from the hills does not arrive this week. The cotton bolts from the coast are fewer and cost more beans. Obsidian cores from far rivers show up in irregular stacks. Canoes still come, but the crews look watchful, and their laughter rises only for a moment before it rests again. The network that once felt like a single house begins to show doors that stick and hinges that creak. Amid the dimming lights, ritual endures with a gentler voice. A mother weaves a belt with a pattern that remembers a city her parents left behind. A grandfather lights a pinch of resin and sets a candle on the 3 stones. A musician takes a drum to the abandoned court and gives it a steady low beat at sunset so the heart will not forget its old pace. A young daykeeper lifts a simple mirror and catches Venus at the rim of the sky and whispers the table by memory, letting numbers pass like beads through his fingers. One evening, you stand in a plaza where vines drape a stair and listen to a rain that arrives at last with real depth. The stones darken to the color of wet slate. Frogs shout themselves hoarse. For a moment you think the old strength might return with this water. Then you see the long gaps where roofs no longer catch the gift and where drains no longer carry it into the city's jars. The system asks for repair that too few hands can provide. The rain runs off into gullies, and the plaza stays thirsty the next day. The last light of a dynasty leaves rooms in stages. First, the sculptors find other work or walk to new hills. Then the scribes close their bundles and carry the books to relatives with safer walls. Then the nobles lay their mats in smaller courts where the wind does not talk about war each morning. At the end, a single old priest tends a shrine and keeps the count so that a child born here will still receive a day that fits. He looks at the lintel and sees old paint that once gleamed. He smiles at it, as one smiles at a friend who now sits in shade. You hold one quiet riddle and turn it in your hands. The final tipping among thin rain, hard war, tired soil, and the lure of steadier markets to the north does not choose a single cause when you ask for one. The riddle prefers a braid. Each strand tightens the others. The braid pulls cities that once shone like suns into a twilight of scattered hearths, hilltop refuges, and small plazas where memory continues to breathe. The count never stops. It only whispers. Night gathers, and the forest sings in slow chorus. A ceiba stands where two roads meet and keeps its watch without complaint. Fireflies write the old rhythm above fallen steps. Somewhere a child learns the day name that belongs to her breath. You walk from the empty plaza with a calm that surprises you. Loss has a long history here, and yet the thread holds. The southern silence does not erase the world. It teaches another way to listen. You arrive where the land turns pale with limestone, and the air carries salt from a nearby sea. Chichén Itzá rises with shapes that feel both familiar and new. Plazas open like bright plates set for ceremony. Porticos throw long stripes of shade. Columns stand in files that catch morning light and hold it like reeds that have learned to become stone. The city hums with the steps of pilgrims and the quiet purpose of merchants who lift bundles from roads that come in from coasts and from the deep green of the interior. You stand before the great stair of the feathered serpent temple. Each face is clean and taut with angles that teach the eye to travel upward. Carved heads wait at the foot with open jaws and careful fangs. The stair rises, and on certain evenings of balance, the light draws a chain of triangles that looks like a living body sliding down to meet the stone heads. People gather without clamor to watch the hour arrive. The hush that follows feels as steady as a held breath. You sense how number and light and belief share one calm intention. A broad court stretches to the northwest. It is a field for a game and a rite, yet the scale startles the chest. Walls lift high and carry carved panels where players stride with belts and headdresses, and where a kneeling figure shows flowers rising from a severed neck like a garden called into being. You clap once and hear the sound carry in crisp steps along the field and back to you. The court teaches the body to listen. It also teaches that victory and offering can share a single stage without bitterness. To the east spreads a forest of columns. They march in rows that seem to fade into the glare. Stone men stand atop some pillars with their chests bare and their hands at their sides. A hall opens among them with a roof long gone, and in the center a figure lies on his back with knees raised and a bowl set upon his belly. The reclining messenger looks toward the stare of nearby warriors. His calm face invites gifts for those who keep watch between altar and sky. The smell here is hot lime and dry grass, and the faint sweetness of copal drifting from a shrine. Market shade gathers along the edges. Merchants unroll cotton that glows like pale water. Shell bracelets click. Copper bells ring with a soft light in their music. Obsidian from high valleys flashes like a dark mirror. A boy counts cacao beans into a cloth bag, while an older woman fans the foam from a jar and pours a taste for a traveler whose shoulders are white with road dust. The drink rises to the lip with a head like a small cloud and a memory of flour and chile. The trade feels measured rather than hurried. The city knows how to greet goods that have crossed long water and longer roads. You walk to the mouth of a round water place at the edge of the city. The bank is sheer, and the surface sits far below, a perfect circle of green and shadow that seems to listen. Wind ripples the skin and presses a coolness against your throat. Offerings have traveled down this wall for a very long time. Gold arrived late and glints like small suns imagined in a place that already had its own lights. Jade lies in quiet greens that still look wet after centuries. Cloth went soft and accepted the water like a gentle bed. Bones lie in the deep with stories known only to the people who spoke the names before releasing the bodies. The place holds prayer and promise and grief together without conflict. The halls and courts speak in a voice that carries distant accents. Serpents with long feathers ride stair edges. Warriors wear round shields and carry clubs edged in obsidian teeth. Square pillars show lines that echo styles from dry uplands to the west. The echoes do not feel like copies. They feel like a conversation that grew dense and fruitful. You sense a change in air after the 9th century, and you taste a city that has learned to bind sea and land and distant plateau into one table where many hands can set cups. Ritual and commerce walk side by side here. Walkers bring salt from flats that shine at noon. They bring cotton from soft fields under sea wind. They bring honey with a taste of mangrove flower. They bring copper bells from river workshops beyond the mountains. In return, they leave with painted vessels that hold stories, with carved shell that smells of clean sea when warmed in the hand, with green stones drilled thin for a light at the throat. The plaza keeps this exchange visible. Priests pass in white mantles and bless a line of bundles. Traders bow their heads and move on. The city understands that road and altar grow stronger together. A keeper lights incense in a small chamber near the Temple of the Warriors. He touches fire to resin and the smoke thickens. Figures on the walls show ranks of men in ordered file and eagles that grip hearts with deliberate authority. A drum behind the wall marks a slow measure. Outside, the sun climbs and the columns throw bars of dark on the ground. Your feet step between them as if you were learning a new music. Stories move through the city and you collect them like small shells. Some tell of a house of Itzá who came from other waters and made this place a seat that looked in many directions at once. Some tell of a bond with rulers far away at Tula, a bond that wore the same feathers and trusted the same bright god who loves morning star. Some tell of pilgrims who learned new costumes and new songs here and carried them back to older courts where they fit like a new cloth draped over a familiar body. The stories agree on the feel of authority. They differ in how the first cord was tied. You linger at a platform where skulls are carved in long files, each face a little different from the next. The air above the stone feels cool, though the sun is strong. A keeper sweeps the platform with a palm broom and scatters petals. He pauses in his work to listen to a flock of parrots, then resumes. The order of the place accepts the sound as part of its rhythm. The edge between dread and devotion stays thin and steady here. The city prefers to let that edge remain sharp and clean so that memory will keep its posture. A gallery near the observatory holds a shell with a hole bored for listening and a bone marked with notches that speak to the sky. The round tower nearby opens eyes at several heights, and the light drops in narrow spears that catch particular crossings. A book could tell the same story, yet the tower tells it with wind and silence and the smell of sun on stone. A boy places his ear to the shell and smiles. The past and the future share one quiet. The firm facts hold while the finer order keeps its secrets. The ball court is the largest of its kind, and its echoes still stand straight. Pilgrims visited the round water and left medals and stones and bodies for hopes that have not faded. Columns marched beside the warriors and framed halls where crowds could move as one. The city flourished after the 9th century and held a wide sway during the centuries that followed. The finer question of where the first spark came from keeps its privacy. Was it a migration with banners and drums? Was it a network of traders who wore influence like perfume? Was it a blending that began in many rooms at once and learned to speak a single tongue? The city whispers yes to all these and returns to its work. Evening gentles the plaza. A breeze lifts the smell of herbs from a cook fire. Vendors fold cloth and tie cords around baskets. A priest sets the last coal into a pot and murmurs beside a small idol that shines with oil. The serpent's stare keeps its line as the sun leans away. For a moment, the stones seem to grow taller as the shadows lengthen. Night birds call from the edge of the water place. You breathe in this balance and feel how power and trade and devotion have found a way to share one courtyard without crowding. You enter a city held inside a ring of stone. The wall curves like a white snake placed gently upon the plain. Watch towers lift above thorn and savanna, and the wind slides along their faces with a soft whistle. Within the ring, Mayapan spreads its courts and houses across the light. A small pyramid rises that reminds you of a famous stair farther west, yet the scale here feels tighter, more domestic, as if ceremony has moved closer to kitchens and courtyards. Gardens press against walls. Turkeys cluck in shade. Traders lean their back racks beside doorways and share water from gourds that smell faintly of fiber and lime. The council house opens its many doors to morning. Pillars hold a roof that casts a cool lattice upon the floor. Chiefs arrive with mantles folded neat and obsidian mirrors tucked at their belts. They sit upon mats in a circle that keeps distance and respect in equal measure. A shell rests in the center. When lifted, its voice calls business to order and the city breathes together as one body. Tribute lists are read with calm cadence. Salt from coasts, cotton from towns with good soil, honey from log hives tended by careful hands, cacao from shaded gardens in warmer valleys. The names ride in a steady chain that joins leagues of towns to the walled seat. You walk the painted rooms where serpents stream along plaster with eyes that still gleam. Warriors stand in files with spears that reflect tiny squares of sky. A priest holds a cord of days and a mask with long lips that smile without showing teeth. Red and blue and yellow hold fast to the wall though many rains have come. The scent is lime dust and old resin and a trace of bat guano from rafters that sleep in darkness. In a corner, a mural tells of a feathered traveler who loves Morning Star and teaches a city to gather itself into good order. The story folds easily into this place, where market and altar meander through one another like two strands of the same rope. Not far from the murals, a masked dancer practices a step with a rattle at the ankle. The sound is small and bright. A boy counts the beats on his fingers and smiles when his count meets the rattle. A woman sets tortillas to puff on a clay griddle and dusts them with ground pumpkin seed. A man sharpens a blade and tests the edge against a stalk of maize. A scribe polishes a shell mirror until it catches the pillar and the dancer and the cook fire in one frame. In this city, power looks like many rooms kept in good order. It sounds like voices that take turns at the shell. It smells like lime and toasted corn and a little honey dropped into a cup. The league that gathers here feels broad. Messengers bring cords tied with knots that stand for promises made in towns, with names that taste of salt and names that taste of hills. Envoys set painted vessels upon benches. A daykeeper names the hour for a shared rite, in which incense will rise from many roofs at once so the sky will see a single smoke. A pilgrim from a coastal temple leaves a small copper bell in a tray near a carved serpent head and bows to the ground with both hands open. The bell rings once and then rests. Power can sit quietly for a long time and still carry a hidden heat. In rooms where light falls thin, two houses watch one another with the caution of families who have shared tables for years. One house follows a name that speaks of old lineage and thick trade ties. Another follows a name that speaks of broad alliances and careful marriages. They sit in the same council and share incense. They send gifts on agreed days and lift cups at the same festivals. They also count favors owed and favors granted, as every city must, and keep those tallies with tidy hands. A season arrives when the ledger fills with heavy lines. The count of drought years has grown too long. Merchants grumble about salt that did not arrive and cotton that came in short loads. The shell calls for patience, yet the room grows hot. Words sharpen without needing to raise their volume. The painter in the hallway touches a serpent scale with red and hears voices turn closer to the sound of flint on stone. In a night when torchlight nails shadows to walls, blades find throats that once spoke calmly beneath the council roof. The circle breaks. The wall holds, but the people inside the wall do not hold one another in the same way as before. The next dawn smells of wet lime and blood thinned by rain. Families take down bundles and lead children through a gate that looks both protective and small. Some walk toward coastal towns that still hum with trade. Some turn toward hill country where old allies keep modest courts. Mats unroll in new places. Shrines awaken in new kitchens. The walled city continues, but its breath no longer sets the rhythm for the whole peninsula. The League loosens like a sash untied in a hurry. Towns claim their own mornings. Markets keep their own lists. The shared smoke from many roofs thins to a memory. You follow a road that heads south by west until trees grow taller and the air turns to a clear green weight. Lakes open like mirrors between belts of forest. On one lake, an island sits at the center like a cupped hand. Canoes move across the water with the quiet of animals that know their path. Houses rise close and tidy upon the island. A temple lifts above roofs and looks at the four shores with a gaze that does not waver. Here the Itzá keep a kingdom that remembers the old ways with a steadiness many have already surrendered. You step into the island court and hear the pulse of paddles against the hulls at the edge. A daykeeper chants, and the sound carries across water. The count lives in the rooms and in the mouths of people who keep it as naturally as breath. A lord receives visitors on a mat woven with blue and white. He wears a collar of jade that looks like cool river stones. His officers carry spears with points that shine like new leaves after rain. Children chase each other between house posts, and their laughter keeps courage alive. Travelers arrive from the north with faces that have known hard roads. They speak of towns that argue more than they sing. They bring stories of letters on skin that burn like fire, and of strangers who ride animals that snort and bite metal. The island listens. Elders weigh the tales with calm eyes that have measured storms and long hunts and dry seasons. The court gathers and decides that the count will continue, and that the lake will continue, and that gods will receive offerings on their proper days. Canoes carry the offerings to small islets where birds stand on one leg and watch with patience. Years pass. The lake takes the color of many dawns. Strangers come and go. They leave a cross upon a shore and write names upon wood that will not last the wet season. The island answers with silence, and then with a song that belongs to old courts. A painted room receives fresh red. A shrine drinks cacao and flour and copal. The count ticks on beads and shells and careful hands. The kingdom becomes a memory for the people who left the walled city, and their children listen when elders speak of an island that holds steadiness like a stone in a strong current. A fact waits in the future, and you feel its weight without rushing toward it. The island will hold its independence until a year late in the 17th century, when long boats armed with thunder will cross the water, and a wooden town will be built where offerings once rested. That year will end a breath that began far back in the first shine of plaster. Yet the ending has not arrived in the moment you are walking. In this hour, the island breathes evenly. The lake keeps its mirror. The paddles lift and fall in time. Night gathers, and the water turns to a dark cloth. A fisherman touches the rim of his canoe and whispers a short prayer to the water spirits who live where roots comb the shallows. Torches gleam in windows. Dogs bark once and then sleep. A flute plays a line of notes that rise and fall like the lake's small waves. You look back toward the peninsula and imagine many small courts resting in their own lights. Each keeps the count in its own voice. Each paints a serpent or a maze lord in quick color before the light fades. A quiet question sits across both places and does not demand an answer. How the League broke along one set of lines and the island kept its unity along another set of lines may depend upon kin and market and the shape of water as much as upon the will of any single lord. The murals and the shells and the walls tell strong stories. The last reasons prefer to walk the shore at dusk where reeds move and words grow soft. You accept the mystery as you accept the way night takes a plaza and leaves it ready for dawn. You return to the city within the ring and stand by the gate. Bats flick past like folded hands. The wall speaks of order learned in hard years. The island speaks of order kept beyond the reach of coastal wind. Between them runs a road of memory that many feet still know. You breathe once for the league that gathered, and once for the kingdom that endured, and once for the villages that found their own rhythm when the circle opened. The stars answer with a fine salt upon the sky. The lake answers with a dark that looks like rest. You walk along a coast where breeze smells of salt and crushed shells. The morning is bright and small fish show silver just below the skin of the water. Canoes slide from mangrove channels and the paddles speak in a soft rhythm. Far out, shapes rise that do not belong to this shore. Tall masts climb like bare trees. Cloth swells with wind. A deep bell sounds. People gather along the beach and shade their eyes. The sea lays down the future in lines of foam. From the forests and towns of the peninsula, the first meetings unfold. Traders bring words and cups to strangers who wear wool and iron. Gifts pass carefully between hands that do not share a language. A cross is raised on a sand ridge where herons hunt. A prayer is spoken into a wind that knows how to carry many kinds of breath. The newcomers move along reefs and channels with pilots drawn from coasts farther west. They read the water with a hunger that is new here. The shore keeps its calm face, though a stir moves beneath it like current that has turned. The first season ends with stories that do not leave. A sickness that rides in air and touch arrives like a pale fire. It moves through villages and courts with a speed that bewilders the day. A cough opens into fever. Eyes burn. Strength drains from the arms of people who have lifted baskets all their lives. In some towns, the drums fall silent for weeks. Fields stand with harvest that no one can gather. The river banks show little smoke at dusk. You stand in a doorway while the night listens. It feels as though the sky has stepped closer and does not know how to step back. Armies follow the sickness and claim that the land has already bowed. Horse hooves strike paving stones and throw small sparks that shock the eye. A man in bright metal sits high above the tallest warrior and moves with the animal as if the two share one mind. Gunfire breaks like thunder that carries iron. Wood shields split. Cotton armor smokes. The smell is sulfur and mud and hot lime. Yet the first battles do not settle quickly. At a lagoon town, the people pull up bridges and cut new channels and send darts from cover so tight that the invaders curse the water itself. The count still names days for resistance, and the bodies of the faithful learn to move in scattered courts that know every route and bend. A friar arrives and walks the plazas with a book at his chest. He learns the sound of names and the shape of day signs and the way the calendar binds families to altars. He listens and writes. He teaches and judges. On a hot day in a town that smells of lime and orchards of bitter orange, he lights a pile of folded bark paper and painted deer hide. Figures that once spoke the journey of sky and the memory of kings flare in a bright breath and turn to ash that lifts and is gone. Idols crack. Drums fall silent. The year is 1562. The place remembers the heat on its stones. The man carries both zeal and curiosity, and he will live long enough to write a grammar that preserves the words of the people whose books he burned. The contradiction sits like a stone that cannot be swallowed. Across the lowlands, the new faith spreads with water and ash and bread that the priest blesses with a steady hand. A cross stands beside a seba, and the two share the same breeze. Old gods step back without vanishing. A household hangs a small Christ above a hearth and lights a coal for him next to the hearthstones. The saints learn the roads and arrive at village feasts wearing flowers that smell of the forest. A procession visits a cave that once belonged to water spirits and now belongs to both water and saint. The songs that name the Mother of Light carry echoes of older mothers who watched fields and weaving and birth long before metal feet climbed temple stairs. You walk the ridges where towns have learned to speak two names for each place. One belongs to deep time and carries the scent of resin and maize. One belongs to new courts that write their law in letters and seal it with wax. The people move between the names with the ease of those who have learned to tend two gardens with one pair of hands. The taxman arrives and leaves with a list that smells of tallow. The daykeeper arrives and leaves with a basket of candles and a calendar recited aloud to children who want a good name for a newborn. The fields hear both voices and grow in their measured way. A rumor of rebels grows in forest corners where white roads have thinned to footpaths. It speaks of a sign that answers prayers with a voice like a drum inside the chest. It speaks of a cross that talks, made of fresh wood and dressed with ribbons and shells, set in a humble chapel at the edge of a village. It tells men to take courage and women to keep the hearth and elders to watch the days for good hours. It promises that water and corn and bullets will not fail if the heart does not fail. The words pass from mouth to mouth and do not decay. A war begins that will last for years and then decades. It opens in 1847 and drags its cord deep into a new century. Villages lift standards. Plantations burn at night. A new capital rises in the forest and then falls. The cross keeps speaking where the trees grow thickest, and the ground drinks rain like a thirsty child. You stand in a chapel lit by candles that smell of beeswax and smoke. Ribbons gently move in the door wind. A drum lies on a bench, and a rifle leans in a corner. Women whisper prayers while a boy sleeps with his head on a folded cloth. Outside, men listen for hoofs and for the click of metal. Inside, a voice seems to move from the wood into the listening mind. It tells of patience and of hunger that must be met with hard hands and soft words. It tells of fields left fallow that will remember the foot that returns to them. You breathe with the room and feel the old rhythm of village and God and forest hide itself inside a new garment. The war runs its long course. Treaties arrive and vanish. Names for the same towns change as power changes. Markets fray and reweave. One morning, the talking cross goes quiet for a time. A generation grows that learns to make peace with a capital far away and to keep a small court at home where elders still chant for rain at the old hours. Houses welcome both church and Seba on the same street. Languages learn a new script and a new law court while they carry the taste of ash and honey and lime in their words. You visit a house where an old woman threads a waist loom. The belt stretches tight across her lap. The pattern carries a diamond that once belonged to a serpent scale. It belongs now to a saint who watches the door, and it belongs to a granddaughter who will wear the cloth at her wedding. On a shelf, a single page from a book looks down with lines of signs drawn by a careful hand. The page escaped the fire and traveled between houses for 3 lifetimes. The family treats it as a guest and sets fresh flowers beneath it on feast days. No one speaks loudly near it. A child kisses the corner and promises to learn the letters when he is older. A mystery keeps a chair near the hearth and refuses to rise. Somewhere under a mound or inside a wall, bundles of folded bark survive, waiting for a dawn that has not arrived. Somewhere on an altar moved at night, a carved idol sleeps wrapped in cotton and remembers the smell of copal. Somewhere in a village, a priest who hates idols keeps a Maya confession manual in a chest because it helps him hear a people he has learned to love. The fates of hidden books and buried gods are not written cleanly. They rest inside hearts and rooms. They rise in dreams. They appear for an hour when the right song finds the right air. Evening comes to a town that once burned its own memory and later saved what it could with a grammar and a prayer. Bells speak in slow measure. Drums answer from a shaded patio. A cross catches the last light and throws it onto a doorway where a painted maize lord smiles with steady grace. Children run with candles to a small shrine in a cave. Women carry baskets of flowers that keep the old colors in their petals. Men return from fields and set down machetes shaped by a blacksmith whose grandfather learned iron from a soldier and patience from a daykeeper. You stand in the plaza and watch the sky take a softer blue. The air tastes of corn dough and smoke and a hint of cacao. The prayers of 3 centuries mingle in the hour between day and night. Voices speak in the language that refuses to fade. The count still moves in the hush of households. Saints bless roads that lead to a forest where old gods breathe in green light. The land keeps its people at the edge of both worlds, and neither world breaks. The story does not end. It learns how to live where endings and beginnings share the same stone. You walk into morning light that falls across market tarps and low houses painted the color of marigold and sky. A woman crushes roasted cacao with a stone and sings to a child who carries a basket of candles. A boy lifts a conch and tries a single note that wobbles and then steadies. You hear the old rhythm braided with the new as trucks hum along the road and a rooster calls from a gate. Words in Maya float above the traffic and settle on shop doors and schoolyards. The language keeps its garden. It grows new leaves without forgetting the roots. In a house with a shaded courtyard, a loom stretches like a quiet river. A weaver sits with her back straight and draws color through color until a diamond opens that once belonged to a serpent's back. She taps a line flat, and the pattern answers with a soft gleam. The cloth will carry the day to market, and the day will carry the cloth to a ceremony where candles rise in small flames that do not tremble. The smell in the room is cotton, a little ash, and the cool stone scent that comes from earthen jars. You follow a path to a village altar where the three hearthstones wait on a platform of fresh plaster. A daykeeper kneels and touches kernels of maize to the corners of the world, named in a voice that has measured many dawns. He places a small vessel at the center, with water drawn from a well lined in old style with round stones. A string of shells lies beside the bowl. The count moves through his hands as if it were a slow river that never runs dry. Families gather and listen and answer with a single breath when the name of the day fits their needs. On a hill nearby, someone lifts a small wooden cross whose ribbons carry the colors of the four roads and the green that stands for the center. A saint rides in a carved niche, and the Seba watches from the far end of the square. The two share the same wind. A young priest speaks Maya without effort, and his words find the ears of elders who nod with calm respect. The village lets both traditions stand near one another, like brothers who work in the same field. You step inside a museum where stones stand in careful light. A panel carries the face of a lord who lifts a scepter that looks like a creature made of cloud and breath. A small plaque explains the day signs cut along the border. A child traces the numbers with a finger and moves lips in a whisper that keeps the count alive. In another room, a codex that once hid in darkness behind a wall gleams beneath glass like a rescued ember. The pages speak in red and black with calm lines that name Venus and storm and right. The guard watches with a patient face, and you feel that he is guarding more than paper. In a quiet office, a scholar leans over photographs of lintels and stelae and draws signs with a fine brush. A name opens like a flower after rain. A verb unfurls a hand that once held a mat. A date fits against an eclipse table, and the sound of the match is like a soft click in the mind. Years ago, one thinker read the script as a true writing of words, and not only of numbers and holy breath. Years later, another traced pictures of rulers as births and accessions rather than only gods and myths. The understanding grew the way a milpa grows when hands keep faith with the reins. A generation listened to the stones with new ears, and the stones began to speak in full sentences. You stand before a long stair where thousands of signs climb like a column of ants. The story that rises across those steps tells of kings who kept a river valley in good order for many cycles. The reading did not come all at once. It arrived in fragments like birds from many directions. Teachers gathered in warm rooms and cool plazas and shared signs and names until the voices on the stones could be heard again. The moment does not sound like triumph. It sounds like gratitude. Outside in a plaza swept clean at dawn, dancers rehearse steps for a feast. Deer masks nod, shells tinkle at ankles. A drum keeps a low line and a flute braids above it. Nearby, a radio plays a love song, and no one seems to mind the mix. The smell is tortillas and orange peel, and a little diesel that will blow away when the wind shifts. A bus painted with saints and maize lords passes a roadside cross that wears fresh lilies. Children wave. The driver laughs. The day rolls forward on even wheels. You climb a mound where a small shrine sits with a view over fields that show squares of green and gold. A woman lays 9 white candles and 1 blue at the edge of a hearth. She whispers names for rain and for the health of a cousin. She leaves a few cacao beans wrapped in a scrap of cloth. A hawk hangs in the air. The land answers in quiet ways. You feel the friendliness of a world that has heard such prayers for a very long time. A book lies open on a table in a schoolroom. The letters on the page carry both Spanish and Maya, and the children move between them with easy feet. A teacher points to a date and then to a picture of a stone where the same date appears in dots and bars. The class repeats the numbers, and the room fills with a light sound like small bells. In another town, a radio show reads a page from a colonial grammar that preserved the cadence of prayers and the shape of old stories. The voice on the radio is careful and warm. The old text breathes again. A festival in a highland town turns evening into a slow river of candles. Women carry baskets of flowers, and men carry drums and shells. A carved Christ rides beside a figure who wears the calm mask of a maize lord. Fireworks rise like seeds that learn to fly. The smell of gunpowder sits beside the smell of copal, and the two hold company with grace. The count names the day for the procession, and the church bells agree. You watch faces shine in the light and feel the continuity like a hand on your shoulder. Facts stand in the daylight. Millions speak Maya today in villages and cities. Daykeepers still number the dawns for naming and marriage and sowing. Weavers keep patterns that show the old directions and the green road between them. Scholars read stones with more sureness each year, and the script keeps giving new names and places back to families who live near those ruins. The present does not visit the past as a tourist. It comes as a relative who brings food. A soft riddle takes a seat beside these truths. Somewhere under a hill, a cache of folded bark still waits for hands that remember the right way to lift it. Somewhere in a wall sealed by time rests a bundle with a mask and a bone and a strip of red that will open a room to air it has not breathed for centuries. Somewhere in a sequence of signs, the name of a quiet queen will one day step into the light. The mystery does not stir up worry. It sweetens the future. Night settles on a hamlet where the road turns to dust. Dogs bark once and then lie down. The daykeeper sits on a low step and looks at the sky while counting in a voice too low for anyone else to hear. In a room behind him, a child sleeps beneath a woven cloth that shows diamonds of red and blue. In another house, a young woman practices a song for a saint's day, and a grandmother hums the chorus. A boy places a small mirror on a windowsill so that tomorrow's sun will begin with a square of light. You breathe with these rooms and feel how the story continues to feed those who carry it. Drifts across the lowlands and hills, and the last colors fade to a soft blue that rests on stone and leaf. Courtyards cool, and the breath of cenotes moves like a whisper under the skin of the earth. Gardens close their flowers and keep a little sweetness for morning. Far above the roofs, a slow band of stars climbs, quiet as moth wings, old as the first plaster that ever shone after rain. Paths empty one by one until they feel like lines drawn for sleep. A few embers hold in kitchen hearths, and the tortillas folded for dawn wait under cloth that smells of cotton and ash. Water settles in jars. A dog sighs near a doorway. The night insects begin their steady chorus, not loud, only patient, and their rhythm lays a calm hand on every house. You picture the ceiba, tall and kind, keeping watch where the roads meet, roots down in the cool, and branches lifting a clean road to the dark. The cities of memory step back and soften, yet they do not leave. Their stairs become terraces of shadow. Their masks become faces in cloud. Their courts turn to clearings where the mind can walk without weight. The count keeps moving like a gentle river under the floorboards of sleep. A candle flickers once and steadies. A breeze shifts the hanging cloth of a shrine and then is still. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your breath lengthen until it feels like the sea at slack tide. Think of maize leaves whispering under moonlight, of foam on cacao, of a shell pressed to the ear with its quiet room of distant surf. The old names fold themselves like pages and rest. The new names lie beside them in peace. Somewhere a daykeeper closes a book and smiles. Somewhere a loom holds its last thread and waits for morning light. And now you may drift into dreams of history. End of script. Sweet dreams.